Wasn't it? It led me, I had a totally different introduction planned to this message, and it led me to have to change my wardrobe in the middle. So you'd understand if you knew what was underneath this, but let's go on. So 84 years ago, right now, 84 years ago, America had no appetite for war. We were isolationist and we didn't want to move from that place. Even though over in Europe, Germany had invaded 12 countries under the direction of Adolf Hitler. And Japan in the Pacific was hurting for raw materials, and they began to invade countries where they could get raw materials. But America looked at that and said they didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. At this very hour, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers were turning into position, ready to launch an air attack against Pearl Harbor. There were 186 planes in the first wave that went off to Pearl Harbor. The attack began at 7:55 Hawaiian time, and it lasted for 2 hours. And after 2 hours were complete, 2,400 men and women were killed, 1,200 were injured, and much of the Pacific Fleet was either damaged or destroyed in Pearl Harbor. Japan, hoping it would render us useless and that it could go on and continue to invade and to continue to move on because it was desperate for raw materials. America faced a turning point, an impossible situation. We had an army the size of Belgium. It was nothing. It was little. We weren't prepared for it. But yet, we faced a mighty juggernaut in Europe that was right about to attack Great Britain and had all their plans. And then the next stepping stone was America. We had Japan, on the other hand, who had been building up for 10 years, getting ready for this particular moment. And yet we weren't prepared. We weren't ready. And as I said, we faced a turning point. A turning point either to give up to these insurmountable odds or to fight back and to do what was right. So the attack took place, horrible conditions, death, destruction, and the next day, President Roosevelt addressed Congress, and he said that December 7th, today, would be a day that would live in infamy. It would be a day that we would always remember. And it was a day in which he said we must declare war on Japan, and a few days later, America declared war on Germany. So what does that have to do with us? What does that have to do with you, with me, with Hope Rising, with Wonder Church, with our brethren in Sierra Leone, and our people in Buffalo? What does that have to do with us? We have, or are, or will go through battles in our life. It's a guarantee. And it's not a matter of if we will go through them. It's a matter of how we respond to them in what we do. The Bible is clear, and it tells us we go through trials. And we'll talk more about that and so on. In John 16:33, here's Jesus. Jesus at the last day, the last moments of a physical being on this earth with his disciples. And so the words that he said, you would think they would parse them like the most important things, not just fluff and how are the bills doing, but important things. And he said in John 16:33, he said, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." So he said, he told us we would have tribulation. Big surprise. What do we go through in life? And then in 1 Peter 4:12, Peter was saying, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning fiery trials, which are to try you, as though some strange thing happened." He said it's not a surprise. Don't be surprised as we face these things. Just a personal story. My dad was my hero. He could do everything. He knew how to do and accomplish whatever. And he died when I was a teenager. And I remember, my memories to this day are of he and I going at Christmas time and putting up lights on our house. We loved to decorate our house. As a matter of fact, the neighbors would say we were waiting for the Hussicks to decorate. We had lights all over, and I carried on that tradition. But what was interesting, one of the memories I had was lights at that time. There were many strings that were done in series as opposed to parallel. So when one light went out, they all went out. And so you had to take a good bulb and screw it in. No, that one's okay. And you keep going down the line. And I remember doing that with them and having such fond memories of those times. And then he died. And at that same year, the same time, my oldest brother, Steve, and I started to attend a church. We started to attend a church that didn't believe in things like Christmas or Easter or birthdays or what have you. And it was devastating because that was my favorite time of the year. It was amazing. It was awesome. The family that we had and so on. It was just a tremendous time. And what our decision did was it literally ripped our family apart. The close-knit family we had was totally gone. It disappeared. There was arguing, strife, difficulty. It was just a real horror story. I remember that Christmas Eve thinking, that first Christmas Eve that we didn't celebrate Christmas. My mom, she went off to a Christmas celebration with other parts of the family. We were so staunch in our belief that I wouldn't even drive her to our family, just to drop her off. Somebody had to come and pick her up. There was no Christmas lights outside, and there was no Christmas tree in the house. Nothing. And I got down on my knees and I prayed to the Lord, and I said, I don't get it. I don't understand it. But Lord, if there is some way that you could reveal that this is truly a special time of the year, this is a God-given time of the year, would you please reveal it? In James chapter 1 and verse 2, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds," all different things that you may be going through right now. Consider it all joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Yeah, we live in a fallen world, and we're going to face those trials and those difficulties. But my definition of perseverance there is faith or belief over long periods of time. It's belief in what God says and what God does. Well, to finish that story, 20 years later, that prayer was answered. We went to church on Saturday, and we heard from our pastor general. This was a broadcast throughout every congregation across the world. And he announced that we were wrong in our belief. We focused so much on the old covenant and on the shadow of what was to come that we forgot about what Jesus did on the cross and what that meant to us. And he said, talking about Christmas and so on, what a joyful, what a joyful and wonderful time that was. And it was just a shock. It came out of nowhere. God answered and showed the truth. And for the first time, as a result of that, and the first time in over 20 years, we started to celebrate Christmas again. For the first time in 53 years, my brother Gary and I, who were so close, celebrated Christmas together just 2 years ago. It began. As never before, our family started to come together, and God healed that division and that difficulty to the point where one of my nieces, she who went through was the effect of this division that we created. She asked if I would perform their wedding that took place last year. My nephew, who his family went through divorces because of this and great difficulty, he and his family are part of a ministry that I'm involved in. As a matter of fact, he'll even be here today to help with what's going on. My kids and I have the opportunity to go all over the country to watch the Bills play. Our last attempt was Houston, which wasn't so good. We sometimes pick the wrong games. My wife, she thinks I'm nuts. She thinks putting up all the lights are a little bit questionable for a 72-year-old man, and especially after falling off the roof and being in the hospital because of doing that. But they're back on. They're back on. Except, and I think I've got time to say it, except, you know when I said when one light goes out, they all go out? I have a section on the gutters, on the roof line, where it's in a nice pattern and so on. Half of the string went out. And it's in the worst possible place. I can't get up there. And with the snow on the roof, I'm not going to go up there. But anyway, they're up, and they are lit. At least most of them are lit. As a family, we faced fire. We've faced many floods. We've faced health situations, death in the family, financial crises. We've faced job loss. And yet I can tell you, and I can promise you, and I can guarantee you, every single time, God came through in his perfect timing and turned that horrific situation into an incredible miracle. And he doesn't just do it for one. He said he is no respecter of persons. He does it for all of us who believe. Every single time he will do that for us. Forgive me, as an old man, I need the notes here it's a questionable turning the pages. Anyway, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. It says, Paul, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this is all surpassing power is from God and not from us. And get this, again, we face these difficulties. And what does he say? He said, We are pressed on every side. And didn't we just hear talking about that? Pressed. And doesn't it feel like there are some times that you look this way, you look that, everywhere you look, we're facing difficulty, we're facing trial, and it hurts, you feel crushed. But what does he say? We're pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed. Do you ever say, Lord, this just doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I don't understand. It's not common sense. He says perplexed, but not in despair. He says persecuted. How many of us are persecuted for what we believe? And the more we go out, the more persecution there's going to be. But he says not abandoned. And then he says struck down. Maybe we'll wind up giving our lives for what we believe. But he says not destroyed. This is why it is so important for us to get, we keep hearing from the pulpit up here, we keep hearing, get into the Word. Because the Word has all the answers. It tells us what to expect in life. Don't be naive and think that there are no trials, there are no challenges, because they are. And every one of the writers of the different books tells us, and we hear stories about it. And what you're going through is not a surprise to God. It's not unique to God, because everything that you may be going through that you may think is unique, he's been through it 1,000,000 times with other people. They've experienced the same thing. And then he tells us in his word how to proceed and how to go forward. I don't know what you're going through right now, but all I can say is to look at your challenges and your trials as opportunities to achieve the impossible, to walk with God and to see incredible results, because I promise you, he will come through. It is an absolute guarantee. Believe and trust him, and he will come through. But you'll say, it just doesn't make any sense. Why would God allow this? You fill in the blank. He answers it in his word. In Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 through 9, he says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than yours." He's got this, he's playing this multi-dimensional chess game, and we're playing checkers down here. We don't get it, but he's got it, and he's working out an incredible plan for us. And then you say, yeah, but I'm going through this. John chapter 3 and verse 16. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." He could have easily just wiped us out and started over. He could have ripped our, the clay model that people make. He could have just said, "Oh, this is terrible. Just start all over with a new lump and start over." But he didn't. He didn't. And God gave everything up for us. And can you imagine what it was like when sin was put on Jesus on the cross? And my dad and yours had to turn his face because he couldn't see. He couldn't handle the sin that was put on his Son, his perfect Son. Romans 8, verses 31 and 32 says, "What then shall we say of these things? If God is for us, who can be against us?" But listen to verse 32. "He who did not spare his own Son, but delivered him up for us, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things?" And he promises to do just that. So 84 years ago, at this time, this date, Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and we faced that turning point as a country and created something called the Arsenal of Democracy, which was termed this country, this people who wanted to have nothing to do with trials and challenges and difficulties, took on the trial, took on the challenge, and created something the world had never seen. And just some examples: American manufacturing, retooled from peacetime to wartime, totally retooled. Ford and General Motors, instead of making cars, General Motors started making tanks and Jeeps and so on. Ford made the B-24 Liberator bomber, amongst other things. Other companies were making ammunition, uniforms for soldiers. What do they call it? MREs for the soldiers to eat and so on. Liberty ships were built. Get this, Liberty ships were built. Let's see where. We were averaging one every 6 months to build before the Arsenal of Democracy took place. One every 6 months. And those ships were used to carry our men into battle, all of the Jeeps, all of the munitions, all of the tanks, all of the guns, you name it. They were responsible for shipping out of America to either Europe or to the Pacific battle. And this was unbelievable. It takes 3 months to build a Boeing 777 jetliner. That's pretty good, 3 months. Ford constructed a facility just outside of Detroit that was 1 mile long and 1/4 of a mile wide to build the B-24s in. And Henry Ford said, our goal was going to be to build one B-24, not in 3 months, one B-24 in 1 hour. And he accomplished it. As a matter of fact, he got it down to 58 minutes. Can you imagine these enormous planes with all the intricacies coming off this line, in this mile-long facility, coming off one every hour? The landing strip that was there to test out all of the vehicles. There were tens of thousands of people working in this facility. And they had to build housing for them in a community and so on. And all of this was done. We declared war on December 7th, 1941. And B-24s were rolling off the line by the end of 1942. Just an unbelievable effort from people that took the challenge of the trial and the difficulty. And with God's help, and there's no question, God was a part of all of this. The impossible was achieved. Of the numerous naval vessels that were destroyed or damaged at Pearl Harbor, I believe it was only 4 of them that never saw action again. Very quickly, maintenance was done on them. They were refloated, and they were able to go out and perform incredible duty in the Pacific, and then also during Normandy and D-Day and what took place there, because a people were willing to take up the challenge and not be concerned about trials and difficulties. My family, in the sound of my voice, again, I don't know what you are going through, but personally, I don't want my eulogy to be one of He was a nice old man who had certain dreams, but rather a eulogy of, yeah, he was a nice old man that had a destiny and a vision of what God gave. And he went out and he pursued it. And you know, if we do that, if we all do that, and we take that approach, God will show up big time. And God will aid and help. And I can imagine if you take that approach, we're all going to die, right? I mean, we're all, there's no question about that. So when that time comes and we meet with the Lord, we'll hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Are you kidding me? You think that's how it's going to be said? I think God is going to be up there and he's going to be pumping his fist and saying, you did it. You did it. You fulfilled the very destiny that I gave you. Everything that I told you, you accomplished it. And you believed me. You trusted me. You had total faith in me. And by the way, you can't imagine what I've got for you. But I just want to show you. I assembled some of the people that you had an impact on, and the very fact that they're here because of you and your efforts. And they just wanted to come and thank you and welcome you in. And you know, my heart's dream is, I hope and I pray that my dad be at the front of the line with a big smile on his face and arms stretched wide and said, welcome, son. Well done, my good and faithful son. In Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5, it says, let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to us? What's he going to do to us? And then in Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I was trying to think of a proper way to conclude this message, and all I could come up with is that God will never leave nor forsake any of us. We have the greatest opportunity. We have the greatest mission. We have the greatest purpose on the face of this earth. And we will face incredible challenges. But that God that plays this multi-dimensional chess, he's got it all figured out. If we got a checker taken, jumped, or a pawn that's knocked off the board, that's a part of what he's doing. And we win. We've read the end of the book, and we win. And I can say honestly, by the word of God and personal testimony, that God does show up, and he is faithful in everything he says and does. And we will just trust him. Just trust him. And trust that destiny that he has for you. We're on a great ride. We have a great opportunity. And let's go and achieve incredible things. In his precious name.